Hey everyone, it's Brennan. Welcome to my channel. Today I have for you a very exciting video. I'm going to give you 10 fall book recommendations. The books I have for you kind of go from creepy paranormal to more cozy fall atmospheric. So without further ado, let's get into these books. The first book I'm going to recommend is Odd Thomas by Koontz. This is a paranormal suspense thriller mystery novel where we follow our main character, Odd Thomas. Odd is just a normal guy trying to live a normal life. He lives in a small town in California and he is an excellent fry cook. He has a girlfriend and he is just trying to live a normal life other than for the fact that he can see ghosts. These ghosts cannot speak to him, but they kind of flock to him. And these ghosts come to him pretty much to get him to solve the mysteries of their deaths. So Odd has developed a relationship with the local police department and he kind of helps these spirits settle into the afterlife. Odd can also see these kind of dark shadow creatures, and when he sees those, he knows that a mass murder, a devastation is about to happen. So he starts seeing a lot of these creatures, so he begins solving this mystery to prevent this mass murder from happening. This book has lots of spooky elements, also has Elvis as a recurring ghost character in it, and I would highly recommend it for the fall season. It's actually the first book in a series of, I believe, 8 novels. You can definitely read the first book on its own. I read probably 4 or 5 of the novels and I've liked all of them. The next book I want to recommend is also by Koontz. It is the first book in another of his series and it is called The Prodigal Son, and I believe the series is called his Frankenstein series. So in this book, follow kind of 2 perspectives. We follow Gillian, who is a 200-year-old kind of monster. He was formed with the parts of different criminals. He has spent his centuries on the earth kind of trying to control his homicidal tendencies. When we begin the story, Gillian is in Tibet, just hanging out with a bunch of monks, trying to live a peaceful life. The second kind of perspective is from some New Orleans detectives as they are trying to catch a serial killer. While Gillian is in Tibet, he gets a letter from a friend from New Orleans, so he travels back only to find out that friend has been murdered. So Gillian gets roped into these serial killings, and when Gillian is in New Orleans, he finds out that the man who created him is also still alive after all of these years. So we follow these detectives that have great humorous banter with each other. We follow Gillian and we learn more about the mystery of this serial killer who has been killing women and kind of picking out different parts of them. So big Frankenstein vibes, great Halloween read, and I would highly recommend. The next book I have to recommend is Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. And this is a really short, quick read. I think it's 200 pages or less. We follow our main character who is currently a middle-aged man, and he comes back to his childhood home for a funeral. We follow him as he kind of returns to this farm that he has blurry memories about growing up. So we follow him as he meets some characters who kind of remind him of his past, and then we jump into some events that happened when he was 7 years old and his family had just moved to this area. It gets pretty spooky pretty fast. He has some mysterious paranormal events happen in his childhood, and we follow him as he starts to remember these. We also get to meet a second character, Letty, who has some magical abilities. This is such an atmospheric read. It gets so creepy and it is so interesting to see this story accounted by a 7-year-old in this book. I would highly recommend a lot of Neil Gaiman's books. Great fall read. The next book I want to recommend is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is an incredible book. I never annotate books. I don't really write in books, but I tabbed a couple of these pages because the scenes in them just hit me so hard. This is kind of a currently relevant book. It's fiction, but it follows the happenings of a virus that breaks out and kills about 99% of the world population. We follow some different timelines. We follow the timeline right when the virus breaks out and the happenings around it. We follow some past timelines from some of the characters, and then we follow about, I believe it's 20 years post-virus outbreak. A lot of this centers around a traveling troupe. They go to different towns in this post-apocalyptic world and perform Shakespeare. Super interesting. The character we focus on in the troupe was about 6 or 7 years old when the virus happened. So really interesting to see things from her perspective, pretty much growing up in this post-apocalyptic time. A lot of the events around this book kind of accumulate around the life of a famous actor during the time of the outbreak. Our opening scene is on him. The girl who is from the troupe is a child actor in the play that he's doing. And then we follow also one of the audience members, we follow the actor's best friend, and we follow the actor's first wife. And through this book, we kind of see how all of their lives kind of intertwine around each other. I love this book. A lot of good just perspective on human nature and what is really important to people. The next book I want to recommend is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This is a mystery thriller. We follow two main characters. We follow Mikhail, who is a journalist, and we follow Lisbeth Salander, who is a punk misfit genius type character. So Mikhail has just run into some legal trouble after a libel situation from his magazine, and now he has been hired as private investigator by this wealthy man to try to find out what happened to this man's niece 40 years ago. She disappeared. So we follow Mikhail as he investigates this mystery, and then we also follow Lisbeth as she tries to get control of her life. Because of her personality and how she comes across to people, she kind of has like a state guardian who has to control all of her finances just because she comes across as an incompetent person. We follow her as she kind of gets control of her life, and we see how her abilities in coding and hacking help Mikhail in his mystery. This is a dark mystery, trigger warnings for sexual assault. I love this series. There's 3 books that Stieg Larsson wrote, and I believe they were all published posthumously, I believe is the term. I know that someone has picked up this series and written a couple more books, but I read the first 3 books in this series and loved each of them. I will say the second 2 definitely follow Lisbeth more, and I really enjoyed those. The next book I want to recommend is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. And if you read this book, I would highly recommend listening to the audiobook. The narration is excellent. We have a male character and a female character, and they are both voiced by different people. Julia Whalen voices Amy in this book. This is the first audiobook I listened to that made me realize that audiobooks are performances. So in this book, we follow our 2 characters, Nick and Amy, and we start the story on their 5th wedding anniversary, but we find out that Amy is missing. Their house is a mess, there's blood everywhere. So obviously the first assumption for who did this falls on her husband, Nick. The story is told from Nick's kind of current day perspective, and then we find Amy's diary, and we get to hear her perspective from her diary. This book has so many twists and turns. I was shocked by each and every one of them, even as the book was wrapping up and I thought we were done getting thrilled. Gillian Flynn comes around with another twist. I loved this book. I feel like this book is very love and hate with people. Definitely all the characters have their hateable and likable elements. They are very morally gray, and I had such a good time listening to this book. I highly recommend it if you want to get into a thriller in this fall season. Okay, jumping into some cozier reads, I want to recommend Mythos by Stephen Fry. I also listened to this on audiobook. Stephen Fry reads it, does an excellent job. This is just a bunch of different Greek mythology retellings, and Stephen Fry puts a humorous spin on them. A lot of these stories I had not heard before. I mean, my Greek mythology background is mainly from Percy Jackson, so it was so interesting to get into some different Greek mythology stories, and it is so great to see Stephen Fry's take on them. His Zeus character in these stories is just excellent. Another mythology book I want to recommend is Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. This was so interesting. Neil Gaiman reads it, and that is just excellent. I don't know a lot about Norse mythology other than the Marvel movies and that Atlantis movie from the 90s or early 2000s. So getting to hear Neil Gaiman read us some stories from this mythology, these are so good. I would highly recommend. It just makes you want to sit down by the fire and listen to his beautiful British accent. I have a cozy mystery to recommend, and that is One Foot in the Grape by Carlene O'Neill. We follow our main character as she has inherited a winery from her aunt. This is set in wine country, California, and our main character's neighbor has had a little bit of trouble on her winery. Her wines have been spoiling, and someone was found murdered in her grape press. Our main character's niece was the last person to see our murder victim, so we get to see how our main character and her handsome wine manager solve this mystery. The second book to this, Ripe for Murder, was also very good. And to wrap this up, I want to give a quick shout out to Penelope Douglas's Devil's Night series. This is a dark romance with dual timelines set between Devil's Night, October 30th, and present day for each of our different characters' lives. I'm having a great time working my way through this series. The books are steamy and they are also incredibly unrealistic. So if you are just looking to have a good time, I would recommend this series. It has great Halloween vibes. So those are my fall reading recommendations. Leave a comment down below and tell me some books you think would be great to read this fall. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in my next video.